morning. We are Mortgage Post 411. I am Audrey Boissonou, and this is my co-host, Kevin Casey. And we are joined today by Mr. Leonard Rosen. Good morning, Leonard.
Well, hello, Audrey. Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Good.
I would just like to wish everybody a happy Mortgage Broker Day. It is, we have a special day. Who knew? I didn't realize that. And also, I just want to take a moment and talk for a moment about, if I say moment one more time, with someone to smack me around, please. We lost a pioneer in the mortgage industry over the weekend. Angelo Mazzello died, and you may remember him from Countrywide. But more than his part in the meltdown debacle, which it cannot be denied he had part of, he was really a revolutionary, and he really brought tech to the mortgage industry. If you'll recall, I remember in the probably 90s, people would call me and say, hey, I want to refinance, but I love my servicer because they have this online, platform that I can go, look at my mortgage, make my payment, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a way that I can, go through you and get my servicing back to them? And I could, I knew how to do that. So anyway, I just want to say that, he was a big deal in the mortgage business, and he was, yeah.
Actually, I remember those days too. There was the opposite was very true. Also, can you get me away from my servicer?
Well, right, but it wasn't ever Countrywide, was it?
No, and
Right.
was one of the better ones to deal with.
Yeah, they were great. So anyway, so there was that. We have a few more things happening this week in terms of economic news. Builder confidence is later today, NAHB, and tomorrow we have starts and permits, and then on Thursday we have existing home sales, and those, everything is moving the market these days, and especially on days like this week, we don't have tons of news. Things can really move mortgage-backed securities. So with that, let's talk to Leonard, shall we? Leonard?
Actually, right before that, I'll you something, and that is that we have a YouTube channel, and we forget to mention this YouTube channel, and then no one goes to it. We wonder, why is no one going to it? So I was looking at our YouTube channel. So we have just put up the last two shows we had. So last week we had Tron Nguyen, #1 loan producer.
Wait. Hang on. Say his name three times fast. Tron Nguyen.
Yes. And he is #1 producer in the country. He had a great tip about how to do loans in other states, even if your company isn't licensed in other states. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, and he's not suggesting you leave the place where you are doing loans currently. Just
no. He's
not trying to steal your brokers. He's not trying to, take business away from you. He's just stating that you have the ability to do loans in other states if you're not licensed there by taking several, certain steps. So if you have questions about that, you talk to mortgage educators, and they can help you get the licensing, and you talk to your state regulator or whomever, the state regulator. Make sure you're doing your own due diligence on this, right, Kevin?
Absolutely, because the caveat we learned after the show was that, yes, it is possible, but it's also possible that the LO or the state could deny you that access to the state. So it's you got to follow all the stuff. You got to go through all the licensing, and then you got to apply for the exception, and the state can still say no. So it's a gamble.
Well, and I found out, I always thought that California, I know there's a couple of states that have dual regulators like California, but I didn't realize South Carolina was one of them, and they are. So I found that out the other day as I was looking to get licensed. What?
Utah, Texas, and was South Carolina, you said, or North?
South.
Well, you know what? The other regulator is North Carolina.
The other regulator, you said. Okay, so you can't see it, but we have Anthony Johnson with Mortgage Educators who's chiming in the chat, which stupidly no one can see. It says Mortgage Educators Forever and their website. So he says they're happy to help anyone with their licensing. And he said Indiana, Utah. I don't know why he said that. Maybe those are the dual license.
Indiana too. Well,
anyway, all right. So Twan was great. Go back and listen to the recording of him or any of the other past episodes.
Especially there's one in the past that not too many people have looked at. That's really a critical one that loan officers need to look at. And that is Anthony Hutchinson. He is the CEO of Vantage Credit Scores. And there's some huge changes coming to credit scoring that is gonna, what you do today is gonna affect 2 years from now. And so you need to get your borrowers out there knowing what's going on.
Okay, because I'm here to be Kevin's truth. He's not the CEO of Vantage Score, but close. He's close. So
Close.
anyway,
What did
and
we
by
change
the
his
way,
title to?
that was weeks ago, and all of that has been changing dramatically. We'll do an update on credit.
Yep.
All right. So with that being said, to go watch Twan, listen to him tell you about how important it is to keep in touch with his database, his 88,000 person database, which I thought it would be like 1 million, but it wasn't. So anyway, make sure that you're going back and touching base with all that. We have some great speakers, including
And subscribe to the 411.
yeah, that's for
YouTube.
sure. And share with your friends. Okay, now we're gonna talk to Leonard, for God's sake. Ready, Leonard?
So, I thought we're over now. So
Oh, he thinks he's so funny. Okay, so I want to give you a little background on Leonard because it's very interesting, and I'm going to have him fill in some of the blanks. So he started out in as the 6 p.m. anchor on the Financial News Network. Is that correct, Leonard?
I was a 6 o'clock anchor on FNN, correct?
FNN. And then what happened?
Well, FNN was a broadcast that was taped, well, actually it was live out of Santa Monica and also New York. And I worked out of the Santa Monica Bureau. And I did that for about 5.5 years. And then Financial News Network was bought out by CNBC, and I had the opportunity to work at the New York Bureau. And that was a hard no for me. I didn't have any desire to move to New York.
See, if you had given me if you'd asked me, I would have said, I would have thought you were from New York.
No, it's not my vibe. And
Okay.
so I didn't want to move out there. And so that ended my career in terms of journalistic broadcasting. And it was a live program, and we talked about the equity markets and real estate and hedge funds and where to put your money, where not to put it, that kind of thing. And I had some very strong views on that. I take a more of a conservative approach in my investing. I've been around for more years than most people, and so I've learned that life gives you the test first and the lesson later. And so I've learned to take a cautious approach to investing, whether it be in real estate or equities markets or Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, whatever it may be. And so I did that. And then I was a syndicator came to me, we called XL Telemedia out of New York, and said, we see you as a talent, and we like to talk to you about having your own television program, but more of a Phil, at that time it was Phil Donahue, Oprah Winfrey, Geraldo Rivera kind of thing. And I said, oh, that sounds interesting. And so we filmed, I think 26 episodes. And that was interesting. It was called the Leonard Rosen Show. It was nationally syndicated. We were at about at that time, back in the late 80s, we were in about 1.3, 1.4 million homes through syndication. So it was, fairly successful. And then interesting, when that gig ended, I was offered to do the Family Feud. Richard Dawson had just died, and there was no way I was going to say survey. I mean, I wasn't going to go there because I was too important to do a program like that. And looking back at it from a career standpoint and just the economics of it, probably would have been a good move for me. But
it might just have been.
Yeah, look. You can never look back. You can only look
Forward.
at where you're at
And
and
what can you do
forward. So I've taken a very philosophical approach to life, a very philosophical approach to business, and it's worked for me. Back in 2002, I started the Pitbull conference, and I sold it last year, November 17th, and it was the largest national private lending conference in the country. And we started with, very meager beginnings, two guys in a coffee shop, and I was sharing my knowledge. And then over the years, it grew to 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800 people at an event, and 60, 65 sponsors, 5-star resorts all around the country. And then I started the National Private Lenders Association 4 years ago. And because I realized that there was no true trade association in the marketplace protecting the private lending community. And that was tremendously successful. And then I sold them both. And now I'm just doing, now I'm doing private consulting for banks and hedge funds and brokers, around the country that want to scale their business. And that's what I do. I keep myself busy doing that. And I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I'd imagine there's a lot of payoff.
So you mentioned that there was a story behind the name Pitbull. How did you call it the Pitbull conference?
Yeah, that actually is an interesting story. So I was 33 years old at my first national broadcast. So you have to imagine that I'm walking in to the studio with iconic guys, Dan Dorfman and Ron Insana, and all of these guys who were really big at that time. Lou Dobbs, big
Yeah, huge names.
Yeah, huge names. And I remember walking in, and there were billboards in Santa Monica for the Leonard Rosen Show. And, I walked in thinking, everybody in the world is watching this, but nobody, it's a cable program. Let's keep it real here. But
Right.
I'm 33 years old, and it was kind of a big thing for me. And I walked in, and I'll never forget a comment that was made to me by Dan Dorfman. And he says, all right, kid, I'm going to give you some advice. And it wasn't as if I was asking for it. He was volunteering it. And he said, see all those billboards and how how Financial News Network has built you up for the show and so forth? I go, yeah. He said, just remember, they can take it away just like that.
Yeah.
No.
Just like that.
Yeah.
And that's the television business. That is the nature of the business. It's not only how good are your numbers, but what kind of an impact are you making with the show, and is there strong followers. So back in those times, and I'm going back in the early 80s, we would write our own script out and put it on a teleprompter, and then you knew where to go with it. Now, a 1-hour program is really 40 minutes. It's 20 minutes of content and 10 minutes per half hour of commercials, and then you go to the next, right? So it's 40 minutes out of 60. So I had to write everything out. It's a live program, so there's no do-overs and so forth. And they're setting up the backdrop, because they have, basically the way it works is it's one studio, and each host has their own backdrop. So it takes them about 60 seconds to make a new backdrop. So they're making the backdrop, and I'm nervous, and they're starting to count me down. 10, 9, 8. The director comes in and he said, Leonard, to my mic, he says, Leonard, teleprompter went down. You're on your own. 3, 2, 1, live. Hello, everybody. My name is Leonard Rosen, and welcome to another edition of Financial News Network with Leonard Rosen. And I got through it to the first break. How, by the grace of God, I have no idea. And the director came out from behind the curtain, and he said, only a pit bull could actually pull that off. And then from that time, everyone in the office called me Pitbull. So it would just seem apropos that when I started the conference, it's Pitbull Conference. And I get a lot of heat from it. People said, oh, it's a dog, it's this, it's that, that sounds aggressive. Yeah, all of the above. Yep, yeah. But I'll tell you one thing. I will tell you one thing. If I were to go back and do it again, I would do it just like that, because what it did was it separated me from everyone.
Mhm.
It separated me in terms of my personal branding from everyone. Now, at that time, there was no conference for private lending. So
Mhm.
brokers who were interested in getting involved in it, there was nowhere to go. So we started off and we just kept building and building and building and building. And then it got to a point where I'm 71 years old. My wife said, "Do you really want to do this anymore?" I said, "No, not really." She said, "Okay, well, no, let's."
So how did you go about selling that?
That's it. That's interesting. That is an interesting. No one, I've done a lot of podcasts and no one has ever asked me that. The key word to business, the key word to business, whether you're doing loans for your neighbor, whether you're building a business, whether you're selling a business, is one key word, and that's leverage. If you have leverage, if you have leverage, the world cannot stop you. And it's important to know how to create leverage, number one, then how to use that leverage in a way that benefits all parties that are involved in the transaction.
Mhm.
So instead of making uh, um, a declaration to the community that I'm selling the business, I let it out in little leaks, and so all the capital providers from New York knew about it. The big law firms knew about it. The big hedge funds, banks, and so forth. And they started coming to me.
Mm.
And we finally settled on selling it to a big law firm out in New York. And the principal of the law firm was a speaker that spoke at our event for about 15 years. And he knew we had, other people were interested, and we actually had a backup offer all the way to the day of closing. And
Nice.
I made sure I reminded him of that. I made sure I reminded him of that. And so that's where the leverage comes in, being able to leverage yourself in a position where it benefits you. And
Mhm.
you do the same thing. You do the same thing in every aspect of your business life, whether you recognize it or not.
Absolutely.
And if you recognize it, that's where the power comes in, the
That's right.
power of leverage. So it was let out in little leaks. That was all part of the strategic plan. Didn't list it with anyone. Wasn't like that. And people came to me rather than me going to them.
Wow. That is
Now, what did you do?
fantastic.
And you ready for this?
Yeah.
Because this is the real kicker. I sold it for all cash, no payments. All cash,
Hallelujah.
all cash up front, no payments.
Right.
Very nice. Now,
And
I gotta ask
why
this
did a
also.
law firm want your business? What does a law firm see as the value for them in your business? Was
Yeah.
it purely monetary? Were they gonna leverage your conference somehow? What are they doing with it?
Well, you have to understand that there was two corporations that we sold. One was the conference itself, which was Pitbull Conference, and the other was the NPLA, which is the National Private Lenders Association. I always believe that the National Private Lenders Association was the most brilliant move I ever made in my life, because it leveraged me in terms of my personal brand, and it leveraged the ability to have a true trade association that was a lobbyist group that was designed to protect the industry, associated with Pitbull Conference. One gave credibility to the other. So I think, and again, I mean, I suppose I'd have to ask the buyers. I think the real perk was, the MPLA, and that's how I see it anyways. Because, this law firm does loan closings. That's their primary function.
Ah,
And so the conference basically built up this law firm over 15 years,
Okay.
literally put them on the map. And so it was, I don't think they wanted to have their competition by the business.
Got it. That makes,
Ah,
okay,
I
that
mean,
makes total sense.
This is how.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, that makes a
Okay,
lot of
so
sense.
so how did you decide to transition into private lending? What did you know about private lending when you started Pitbull, if anything, or how
Well,
did that?
nobody really, back in 2002, nobody really knew anything. There was a couple guys named Harv and Marv that were the hard money lenders in the community. And if you were looking for a quote at that time, hard money loan, you'd find Mitch and Murray or Harv and Marv, a couple of guys, and that's how it worked. And so what I wanted to do is institutionalize it. And so none of us really knew that much about it. I mean, I've been a real estate investor my whole life. And although I never used private money to finance any of my projects, I was certainly aware that it was out there. And so what we had to do was educate the community as to what it was. So we had to create what it is. We literally had to create what is the product, what are the offerings, how does it work, and so forth. And back then in 2002, our industry was not institutionalized. It was
Right, it was very Wild West then. Yep.
there's just local. At that time, they were called hard money lenders. Now they're called,
Private money lenders.
Right. Back at that time. And so, we didn't have institutional financing available. Wall Street looked at this as kind of like the black sheep of the industry. And through the years, we legitimized is that a word? Legitimized? Yeah, we legitimized
We'll
the
make it a
industry.
word.
Yeah, well, we're going to make it a word, Audrey.
Yes.
Over the years. And then when Wall Street, back in 2000, about 2000, right after the real estate implosion, 2010 perhaps, real estate implosion 08 and 09, right around 2010, something interesting really happened. And someday I'm going to write a book, maybe, and tell the real story. All of the grifters that came in and out of the business, all of the guys that really made a huge positive impact on the business and so forth. So about 2010, Wall Street started to look at the asset class and realize, hey, this is a really interesting asset class. And so then at that point, we had legitimized. Thank you. It's just legitimized. Thank you. See, that's what we had. That's why I thought it was Vito and Guido. Well, Vito and Guido were there too. Okay, Sean, thank you. But anyways, when Wall Street recognized it as an asset class, then you had hedge funds come in. A Rock Capital out of New York, a Turac Capital, Share States, Lima One. All of these big players came in because they were able to leverage their portfolio with Wall Street money. That's what changed the entire industry.
Wow.
And I tell an interesting story on how a Hawaiian mango changed the entire private lending space. Want to hear the story?
You go.
A mango in Hawaii changed the entire lender space. I was living in Hawaii at the time, and I used to commute to Los Angeles to do my Financial News Network program. We had a babysitter at that time, and forgot what her name is. She was so nice. So she took care of the kids. And then one day she said, could you take me to my uncle's house and drop me off there instead of my parents? Yeah, sure, no problem. So I pull up to this very local house in Hawaii in a very local neighborhood and dropped her off. And the uncle came out and said, hey, bro, come on in. I want you to meet the family. Okay, that's fine. I go in, very local style. And in the back of his property, he had mango trees and avocado trees and banana trees and papaya trees. I mean, it was amazing. I probably had 2.5, 3 acres of land. And he had a picnic table out in the backyard. And he said, would you like to try a mango. We just picked it from the tree. I don't know if you know how to pick a mango, but it's a long stick with a long stick, like 20, 30-foot stick with like a basket on it. And they go up and they shake it and the mango would go into the basket. They pull it down. Now, if you've ever had a Hawaiian mango that is just warm from the sun, not in the refrigerator, I got to tell you, it's pretty unbelievable. And we sat down at this picnic table, as they say in Hawaii, talking story. And he's telling me about his family and he's a fisherman and so forth. And meanwhile, he hands me the mango and a knife and I'm slicing the mango, I'm eating it and so forth. And here's where the story starts. In terms of the lesson, I was done with the mango and I didn't want to be rude. I want to just like put it. So I saw that there was a like a pail. And so I got up, I took the seed, I put in the pail, and this guy exploded on me. He said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? How long you lived on the island, bro? How long you lived on the island?" Well, I lived there about 5 years. He said, "You should know better." And I had no idea what he was talking about. He picked it up out of this pail or this bucket, and he brought it. This is a true story. This is an absolute true story. And he brought it back and he set it on the table. So, see that mango? He says, when you eat a mango, you plant the seed so the next generation has the pleasure of eating that same mango that you ate in a different generation.
Wow.
And I felt like this big. And that's when I realized that business is about giving to the next generation, to other people, and not just taking it and eating it. That was a monumental moment for me. And
Wow.
I told that story at my conferences, and I'm giving you the short version with about all the theatrics, with the picture of a mango on the PowerPoint screen and so forth. But that and that was a huge lesson for me. And
Yeah.
that was a turning point for me.
Wow. Okay. I gotta say, for a guy to take that situation and turn it into a life lesson, it says a lot about you, Leonard. It really does.
Well, I'll tell. Well, thank you. I look at things, I think, differently than many people look at. There is nothing ever bad that happens to you, ever.
Correct.
It
Right?
doesn't
Yeah,
happen
it's
to
how
you.
you
It
take it.
happens for you. It happens
Yeah,
for you.
yeah. They're all life lessons. Everything.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
So we're in the middle of this time right now, another transition in the mortgage business, of which there are many, right? We're always moving from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And you got to keep up, which is not easy. So I'd like to talk. I mean, I remember hard money back in the day when it was Vito and Guido, to the listener's comment. And it was really expensive. And now it's comparable to non-QM in a lot of
I
situations.
got pricing this week on a private money loan. It was cheaper than conforming.
Yeah. So it's interesting how we've changed, and a lot of loan officers still haven't gotten the memo on private money. And so let's talk about what private money is today and what we're doing in this market, and how LOs can make this part of their business. What are your thoughts on that, Leonard?
Well, like anything, one has to take a look at their business model and take a look at a 5 to 7 year span in terms of building a book of business. People have a tendency to make decisions based on today's market conditions, what opportunities are available today, rather than how can I take my vision over a 5 to 7 year span and build on my book of business. So it has to start with that. It has nothing to do with interest rates. It has nothing to do with current market conditions and what the Fed is offering, because everyone's living under those same circumstances.
Right.
It is. So what business are we in? We're not in the mortgage business. We're not in the private lending business. We're in the business of solving problems.
Absolutely.
That's the business That's the business everyone's in. How can I best solve my client's problem? And a comment that I made when I spoke to Audrey yesterday, which I think is really important, and that is that markets are moved by those who are impatient to those who are patient. That's how markets move. The impatient moves the market. The patient investor, the patient business person is the one that's stabilized, and they're patient over a period of time. Perfect example, house next to me, lady died, and the estate is selling the house. And I looked at it as a possibility. The economics didn't work out for me. I didn't like the numbers and so forth. But they impatient wants to sell it right away. If they'd hold on to that property for they bought this house 50 years ago for $12,000. It's now worth 2.2 million. The impatient wants to sell it right away for a couple $1 million. They wait 10 years, rent it out, get the benefits from the rental on it, wait 10 years, it'll be worth another $1.5 million. So markets are a way of creating a medium for the impatient to make the patient rich. That's how it works.
So
That
I
is
want to
how
make
it works.
sure that we stick a pin in that, because as we're looking at the headlines in the last couple of days, Redfin saying just 1% of homes have sold this year. So it's really interesting because the negative spin by the media is extraordinary. It has an impact on the market and the way people are thinking, not just the consumers, but us, right? Oh my God, we're in such deep doo-doo. There's no inventory. But if we go with your observation, which is people are just being patient, they're hanging in there. They have a good situation and appreciation. If everyone had last year, when prices started declining, I say that, knowing that that's not really what was going on. When all the headlines were, oh my God, the sky is falling, everything's going to, HE double toothpicks, and we're all in trouble. If everyone had put their houses on the market then and sold them, they would have missed out on what is now showing to be additional appreciation. We're being forecasted that we'll have somewhere between 4 and 10% this year, which again, we don't want runaway inflation or appreciation, not inflation. Well, either actually, because it's not good for the economy. It's not good for housing. It's not good for anything. But to Leonard's point, people are being patient. They're just waiting it out. They're staying where they are right now. And if we cannot freak out, oh, there's no inventory, there's no this. So I thought that some of these numbers were interesting. So in 2023, 14 out of every 1,000 homes in the US changed hands. That's 1.4%. In 2019, so before the pandemic and all the crazy of the low interest rates, it was 19 out of every 1,000. So they're saying that that's a huge difference. To my mind, it's not.
It's
I
not a
mean, it's
huge
1.4 to 1.9%. So there are some markets that are worse than others. And Kevin, Northern California, the Bay Area has the lowest turnover rate in the nation. Out of all the 50 markets that they look at, we have the lowest. So there are some places that are having a harder time of it. But Leonard, I love what you said. People are being patient. And if you're patient, typically things work themselves out and they get better. And so
Well, let me follow up something that's important.
great.
Being 71 years old, I've been around the block a few times, and I understand the mindset of the investor. I understand the mindset of the borrower. I understand the mindset of the seller. In my early years, if I felt pressure to do something, I felt pressure. There was a financial pressure, whatever the pressure may be. I found that I would make a decision based on today's environment and putting a Band-Aid on the problem so I don't feel the pain. But when you're not under pressure, think about it. You have more of a creative aspect to making a decision. When you make decisions when your back is up against the wall, rarely short-term and long-term, is that going to benefit you? You
Yep.
want to be able to recognize, okay, I'm feeling pressure, all right? Option one, I could do this. Option two, I could do. Option three is,
Do nothing.
I could take a deep breath here, take a deep breath and ponder it and think about it. And then maybe there's a hybrid between option A and option B or whatever it may be. But when you don't have that economic pressure on you, you're able to make more sound decisions. That's what I have found. I mean, like I said earlier, life is interesting. It gives you the test first and the lesson later. So there's no real game plan for how to build your book of business. There's no real game plan. I mean, yeah, you can go to seminars and conferences and so forth and get training, but it has to do with the 6 inches between your ears. How do you see life? With what eyes do you see life? And everyone sees the world with different eyes.
Absolutely.
And so
I wonder-
my teaching is slow your roll down, take a look at your business model on a much longer basis rather than the next 6 months. Take a look at it over 5 to 7 years. Because the reality is, if you don't do it that way, what happens is drama will walk into your life, whether you create it, invite it, or identify with it. Drama will be knocking on your door. And drama is not a good thing.
No. I have a family friend who's quite wealthy, and he will never make a buy on this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You got to move fast. He's like, nope, that's not me.
Yeah, right. Right. And I like Jill James' comment too. Most of the headlines are based on realtors' expectations. Historically, realtors on the coast expecting 50%, 15 to 20% turn. Look, markets change. They go down, they go up, they go down, they go sideways, they go forward, they go backward. But if your business model is grounded in reality, then the fluctuations don't affect you. I don't care if the interest rates right now for owner occupied is almost 7%, right?
Mhm.
Almost 8% on investor from the bank.
Yeah.
The bank.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So, okay. How can you take that information and leverage it for yourself? How can you do that? There's lots of ways of doing it. I mean, if I were an LO in today's market, I'd be making several $1 million a year. I don't care what the interest rate is. It doesn't matter to me because I'm in the business of solving problems. Now, maybe it doesn't make sense for your borrower to buy right now. Maybe it makes more sense for them. Maybe it makes more sense for them to, refinance and get some cash out. Whatever it may be. But I think one has to look at, the entire situation. Buying is a good thing. Primarily, I've been a seller my whole life, a seller of information, a seller of goods and services. I'm not a buyer, I'm a seller.
Yeah. Well, considering that, okay, listings are down, inventory's down big time, but demand is up and 50% of homes or more are in bidding wars right now. And so in the sales price to listing price, things are going over. So I have a client this morning. I have a client who just placed this morning an offer on a $1.2 million fourplex, and he went $55,000 over asking. There are 8 offers, and it is unlikely that he's going to get it because everyone's waiving everything and God knows what they're going to do. And we do. And he's very much, okay. This is a guy who texted me a few days ago and he said, Audrey, the critical question is, what is the interest rate? And I said, I texted him back, or I called him and I said, Christopher, that is never the critical question. The critical question is is this thing going to cash flow at the rate that we're doing today?
100%.
And
100%.
because we have a long history of doing the business together, he's listening to me, right? So we stopped talking about rate, and now he's like, what's the, so when his purchase price, when his offer price went to 1.2 to 1.255, his text to me this morning was, what will the payment be? So he can calculate what
That's
will
right.
really flow,
Yeah, he's doing
right?
the economics on the deal, right? I get
That's
it.
right. So
Yeah.
are we, and again, I've talked about this in the last few weeks. I just closed a refinance on a triplex, 10 1/8 is the rate. And it made sense for the borrower. You know what I mean? I just did a cash out refinance, Fannie Freddie, for a guy, 8 1/8. But it made sense. He needed the money and he could afford it. And so it's like,
Impatient to the patient. He's impatient. He's willing to pay the 8 1/4, and the lender is patient. He's willing to take that 8 1/4. And
well, maybe he's taking that
that's how it
money,
works.
maybe he's going to invest it in something better with
Yeah,
a higher
no,
return.
no,
You never know,
I'm
right?
I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. I'm just acknowledging the situation.
Yeah. No, and again, I think the number one issue with LOs, because I've acknowledged it for myself, is that we get caught up in the rate first. And so we won't even present an option to our borrower that we find unpalatable. And
Mhm.
so we need to switch our
I used-
thinking. We keep
Yeah.
talking about this, Kevin and I, for the last, I don't know, for a long time, because it comes up for us all the time. And it wasn't until I shifted my thinking around rates that I was open to doing deals I wouldn't have done before.
Yeah, the
So,
big one came from me with buying your home first versus selling your home first. Because I always thought, oh, you should sell your home first, and then you have the money is set aside, you buy the other house. Until I tucked one of our loan officers in my office went on vacation, and he was big into buying the home first. And he walked me through the math, and it's like, oh my God, yeah, they're paying 10%, but oh my God, they saved $500,000 by doing it this way. So I am like now the biggest advocate, and I preach it all the time. Buy the new home first, use a bridge financing. Yeah, you're paying 10% or whatever it is for that bridge money, but you will end up at the end of the day with $500,000 more in your pocket than you would have if you bought the home first.
Yeah, look, again, it all comes down to two things: how you see the world, and do the economics work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you have to take a look on the you have to take a look of the economics of the deal. It doesn't matter what the interest rate is. People are still going to buy property. People are still going to sell property. And the reality is, I mean, you don't have to be Einstein to realize these interest rates at some point are going to come down. I mean,
Right.
that's right. I mean, if you just take a look at historically the interest rates over the past 20, 25, 30 years, of course, let's take out the Carter administration where they're at 21 and 22%. But if you take that part out, the interest rates will fluctuate. And it has to do with, the overnight lending rate that the Fed establishes. And I think it's not going to happen next year. It won't happen this year. Perhaps third quarter of 2024 is when we're going to start to see interest rates go down, and the market will then start to shift. The market never stays the same.
Right.
Ever. It's always in a constant state of change.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
an LO who's bitching because they were selling loans at 3.5% and 4% a couple of years ago, and now the loans are set. You know what? Go get another job, because this is the mortgage industry. Hello, that's how this works.
Right.
Anyone can make money when the interest rates are 3.5%. But it's the lion, not the lamb, that can make money when the interest rates are 7% in terms of getting a loan, right?
Right.
I mean, that's just the way it works.
This is opportunity for us. And if we're staying in this business, for those of us who are staying in this business, this is our career. This is what I've done since 1989. I'm not going anywhere.
Yep.
I've shifted though, because what you have to do as an LO is have a broader horizon that you're looking at.
What did you
So if
shift
you're
to? What did you
Pardon me?
shift to?
shift from, like, if you like, again, I had to overcome my block about interest rates, and oh my God, that's too high. Like, I've talked about this before. My client who I'd worked with for years, investor, self-employed, we'd always really struggled to get him into a conventional Fannie Freddie product, always. And finally, last year, he came to me with a property. I could not fit it into anything conventional. And finally, I was like, we could do hard money. And he was like, okay. I was flabbergasted because I wouldn't have even suggested it before. It was so dumb.
Well,
But it was what it was, right?
let's-
And it was a huge eye opener for me.
let's take a half a step back. It's not the private money that becomes the opportunity. The opportunity is there's more money right now in multifamily and commercial on the private lending side.
Yep.
I know guys that were LOs and junior mortgage brokers making $65,000 a year, and they got involved in private lending on the commercial side, multifamily, mixed use, commercial, and they're now making $2, $3, $4 million a year.
Right now.
Right now, as we speak, right now. Now, if your comfort zone is doing owner occupied residential, that's fine.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have to ride that out.
Yep.
My point is, why not add this to your book of business?
Yes.
Learn how to do that.
Yes.
How about this? Let's say you learned how to do multifamily financing, mixed use financing, commercial financing. Let's say you learned, you understood, you understand who the players were, where the capital sources are, where you can get where you can get the money, and so forth. For your borrower. Let's say you figured that out. And let's say you only did one deal a year from it. Just one, not once a week, not once a month, one deal a year, and you could pick up $100,000 on that deal. Was that worth it? Over 5 years, if you only did one deal, that's $500,000.
Right.
That's only one deal. What if you did 2 deals a year?
That's
Yes.
$1 million.
Yes.
You see where I'm saying, or what I'm
Yes.
saying
100%.
is that you don't have to wedge yourself into just doing one thing. Open your eyes, because there's a whole world out there where you can make a tremendous amount of money. So let me ask you this question, because I'm curious, because I don't come from the mortgage broker community. I come more from the private lending community.
Right.
What does the conferences, AIM and some of the other conferences, what are they saying? Are they saying just toughen it up? Or I mean, what is the nectar of the message that they're communicating to the brokers and LOs?
I think it really depends on the conference. Like, we went to one a few weeks ago. It was really tech is everything. Tech is the future. Tech is what's going on, which, I believe there's a blend of what we need to do with tech, but that's another thing. And then, it depends on the conference. Some of them are, what do you think, Kevin? Like,
Some are, obviously the conference can be driven by who's going to advertise at the conference. So
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
non-QM still seems to have the money, so they're pushing, more non-QM.
Acro lending and so forth, big
Yeah.
non-QM. Now, they were a sponsor of ours for years. Let's talk about this tech thing for just a second, because I asked the question, what's the message? Tech. Okay, that's what you say when you don't have an answer.
Yeah, I will not. I
You
totally
have
agree.
to have a client wanting to do business. You know how many deals throughout the years I wrote on a napkin in a coffee shop and I was able
Yeah.
to close deals? Okay.
Yeah.
Tech, look, tech is great,
Yep.
but tech is not the answer. One-on-one relationships. Our whole industry is a relationship-based business, not a transactional business,
Correct.
right? Whether you're
Yes.
dealing with owner occupied, whether you're dealing with commercial, whatever, it has to do with personal relationships that we have. Because what happens is, let's say, for example, you have a client that you've been servicing for many years. Okay, they bought, they financed with you, they refinanced with Rachel, or whatever it may be, they bought another house, whatever it may be. At some point, that client may want to buy a piece of real estate outside of his own property, and you're there.
Yes. Yes. I noticed a client who I think I locked their last refinance below 2% on a 15-year fixed. I am never touching that house again. We all know it, right? They're going to pay it off in the next few years. It's done.
Correct.
They posted on Facebook the other day that their kids were doing a bake sale to benefit and they were going to send all the money to Ukraine. And I thought, you know what? I had this vision of these little kids, all these kids, they have 5 of them, all of them baking and preparing all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to go and get some stuff from them and spend some money with them. So knowing full well that I will never touch their house again. And it was really cute because there were a ton of people around when I got there, and there were families there, and they're like, oh, who's this? Oh, this is our mortgage broker. They introduced me but we talked about the fact, and they must have said, thank you for the amazing mortgage 15 times. But also I said, I know we're never going to do that house again, but you might buy a rental property. You might buy a second home. Your kids are going to buy
exactly,
houses.
that's exactly
We
what
will
I'm talking about.
definitely, we'll be in touch again at some point. And they're like, absolutely. And so, but putting it out there, like that doesn't come first nature for me for some reason. It just isn't. And so, but I'm making myself do it. I'm shoving myself out of my comfort zone. And during lockdown, I kept saying that everyone needed to wake up in the morning, take a shower, put on some makeup, put on some clothes that didn't stretch, and do something like that resembled a regular work. And then once we opened up, I kept saying, you got to do all that and get out of the house and go meet people face to face. And so the tech thing, as our costs per loan have mushroomed because of tech, which the estimates I'm seeing are like at least 50% of the costs are tech.
Yeah,
and they
it's
keep
the
going
loan
up,
officers,
and
like the loan officers we haven't changed our commissions.
I'm gonna tell you a short story.
Okay.
My son Matt worked for me for 16 years. He now works for the new owners of the business. You get a chance, connect with Matt.
He's a great guy. I've talked to him numerous times. I love him.
Salt of the earth guy.
Yep, great
And
guy.
he made a comment to me a couple of years ago. And again, he worked for me for 16 years. And he said, Dad, he said, the more calls I make, I'm just going to stumble upon business. He makes 100 calls a day. I'm just going to stumble upon business. And it was such a refreshing comment. I mean, we're talking about a guy that is the epitome of being a Pitbull. I mean, he's just a monster. And he considers a no as one more step to a yes.
Wow.
Just keep talking to people. Look, the best advice is brand yourself where people know. I branded myself as Pitbull,
Yeah, you said the word brand so many times throughout this thing, which I find fascinating because you are 71 and this whole branding thing really became kind of front and center for everyone recently.
Oh, no, I was way ahead of the curve.
Yeah,
my dear.
you were way ahead on this.
I'm going to tell you a story that I typically don't tell.
Perfect.
While I was doing the Financial News Network, I also worked for the at that time, WWF. And my name was Sonny Ross.
Wait, hang on. I just want to make sure we're clear. This is the wrestling thing, right?
Let me tell the story because it's a great story. we have sheer pandemonium here in the ring, and I did that. And I bleached my hair blonde. I did the whole thing. It was crazy. It was crazy. And I was doing this the same time I was doing Financial News Network. So I had hair that was down to here. So I had to put it up with a bun in the back and spray on my hair so I didn't look like it was black. Yeah, it's a crazy story. But anyways, I asked one of the wrestlers at that time, I don't know if you ever heard of Ric Flair. And I asked him, I said, why do wrestlers bleach? Now, again, I was 34 years old at the time, and I'm 71, and I'm still telling the story, which means it had an impact on me. This is where I learned branding. Why do professional wrestlers bleach their hair blonde? And without even thinking about it, he looked at me and said, to be different than other men.
So it was a brand.
That was the brand. And that's where I learned branding from a professional wrestler. And that's a fact, and that's the truth.
Leonard Rosen, the man who gets the most profound life stories from the most obscure, bizarre little minuscule events. So if we all took a moment and reflected on the happenings of the day, you never know what we might come up with. Yes.
No, you get some great stories.
Holy moly,
there's
Leonard.
stories that have impacted my life, and I will also say there's stories that we were talking about 2010 when the hedge funds came into the market. They made hundreds of millions of dollars from me. Hundreds of millions of dollars from me, because I created the medium, I created the stage, I created the marketplace. And every single one of them will come right out and admit, if it wasn't for Leonard Rosen and Pitbull, well, I don't know where we would be. And so we once
it would still be Vito and Guido.
Pardon me?
It would still be Vito and Guido.
Well, it would have progressed, but not to where it is now. And everything progresses, whether that's my idea or not my idea. But for my 70th birthday last year, I took 20 of my biggest clients, all expense paid trip to Jamaica, and we partied for a week in Jamaica. I mean, so we became friends, and they're appreciative of what I did for them and appreciative of what I did for the marketplace and so forth. But look, my legacy is over. I mean, my part, I did my part, and now I'm doing private consulting and to teach people what I've learned throughout the years and how to build your book of business. And the key is this. I know we're short on time or out of time. The key is to this. Build your business in such a way that you could sell it.
Wow. Yeah.
How many LOs and mortgage brokers? Ric Flair, that's right. I'm reading the comments. And by the way, I'm reading every single comment.
That's great.
Build your business to where it has equity. Build your business to where, I've had mortgage brokers say, Leonard, I made $1 million last year doing mortgages. Great. But they couldn't write you a check for $500.
Right.
Right? Because they live beyond their means. And next year they have to climb that same mountain. Build a business that creates equity for yourself, where 5 to 7 years from now, you actually have something to sell where you can leverage it. That's like the best advice I could possibly give anybody who's listening to this podcast.
Goes right back to my original question of selling your business. It was perfect.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah.
No one's
Leonard
said, I do these all the time. Seriously, Kevin, I do these all the time. And no one has ever asked me that.
Yeah, if I had more time, I'd go into more details about the behind the scenes and how you made your business.
Oh no, it was 6 months of wasn't a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well,
but I didn't take it personally.
We are honored that we're honored that you've been with us today, Leonard.
Well, I'm honored that you asked me to be on, and if anyone wants to, wants to follow up and ask many questions, I could be contacted at leonard@leonardrosen.com.
Yep,
Awesome.
and if you forget what that is, let me know and I'll connect people with
Good.
you. And
Good.
next week, guys, you have to tune in live. Live. We have Mark McCardle with the CFPB joining us, and we can't post those recordings. So live next week, Mark McCardle, share it with your friends. We'll get the flyer out earlier. And again, Leonard, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your time and all of your wisdom today. It was a pleasure. And it was, I mean, God, really some profound moments. It was really something. So
Yeah,
thank
that's a
you.
good show.
Thank you. Mwah. Have a great
My-
week, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Kevin. Thank you,
Nice
Audrey.
meeting you, Leonard.
It was my
Bye-bye.
honor.
Yeah, Audrey.
Thank you so much.